September 15th, 1943. Haarlem, Netherlands. 3:47 p.m. Freddie Oversteegen pedals her bicycle down Grote Houtstraat, one of the main avenues running through the city centre. She's 14 years old. She wears a simple dress, knee socks, and a cardigan. Her blonde hair is pulled back with a ribbon. In her bicycle basket sits a canvas bag. To anyone watching, she looks like a schoolgirl running an errand for her mother, delivering groceries perhaps, or books from the library. 2 SS officers stand on the corner ahead, smoking cigarettes, watching the street. They're part of the occupation force that's controlled the Netherlands since May 1940. 3 years of German rule, 3 years of curfews, ration cards and roundups. The officers are relaxed, bored. Just another afternoon in a conquered city. Freddie approaches. The officers look at her. One of them smiles, waves, a friendly gesture. Look at the little Dutch girl on her bicycle. So innocent, so harmless. Freddie waves back, smiles, keeps pedalling. She turns the corner onto a side street, stops, reaches into the canvas bag in her basket. Inside are 2 British-made Mills bombs, hand grenades, 4 ounces of TNT each, wrapped in segmented cast iron designed to fragment into dozens of lethal shards. She removes 1 grenade, pulls the pin, counts to 3. Then she throws it around the corner. The explosion echoes through the narrow street. Glass shatters. People scream. Freddie doesn't wait to see the result. She's already back on her bicycle, pedalling away, taking side streets and alleys she's memorized over months of operations. By the time German soldiers rush to the corner, she's 4 blocks away, just another schoolgirl on a bicycle disappearing into the maze of Haarlem's old town. The 2 SS officers lie dead on the cobblestones, killed by a bomb delivered by a 14-year-old girl they waved at 30 seconds earlier. This is not Freddie Oversteegen's first kill. It won't be her last. By the time the war ends, Freddie and her sister Truus will be credited with killing or facilitating the deaths of dozens of Nazi officers and Dutch collaborators. The exact number is unknown. The sisters never kept count. Some estimates put it over 40, others say more, but the numbers don't capture the full story. This is about 2 teenage girls, Freddie 14, Truus 16, who became 2 of the most effective assassins in the Dutch resistance, girls who used their innocence as a weapon, who smiled and waved at the men they were about to kill, who rode bicycles through occupied streets carrying bombs and pistols hidden beneath schoolbooks, girls who looked so harmless that Nazi officers never saw them coming. To understand how Freddie Oversteegen ended up throwing grenades at SS officers at age 14, we need to go back to where it started. Schoten, a working-class neighbourhood in Haarlem. Freddie Decker was born there on September 6, 1925. Her sister Truus was born 2 years earlier. Their mother, Trientje van der Molen, was a communist and a fierce opponent of fascism. Their father left when the girls were young. Trientje raised them alone, working factory jobs, instilling in them a sense of justice and defiance against authority. The Oversteegen household, Freddie and Truus took their mother's maiden name, was always open to people in trouble. Even before the war, Trientje sheltered refugees, political dissidents, Jews fleeing persecution. Their small apartment became a safe house. The girls grew up watching their mother risk everything to help strangers. It was normal to them. This is what you do when people need help. Then came May 10th, 1940. Germany invaded the Netherlands. The Dutch army fought for 5 days before surrendering. The occupation began. German troops in every city. Swastika flags on public buildings. New laws. New restrictions. Jews forced to register. Communists arrested. Resistance members executed. Trientje joined the resistance immediately. She already had the connections, the safe house network, the willingness to risk her life. She began hiding Jewish children, moving them from Amsterdam to safe houses in the countryside, using forged documents and bribes. It was dangerous work. The penalty for hiding Jews was deportation to concentration camps, or immediate execution. Freddie and Truus helped. They were teenagers, too young for anyone to suspect. They'd accompany their mother on missions, acting as lookouts, carrying messages, transporting documents hidden in their school satchels. The Germans barely noticed them, just Dutch girls, harmless. This worked until early 1943. By 1943, The occupation had intensified. The Germans were losing on the Eastern Front. They needed more resources, more forced labour, more brutal enforcement. The Gestapo expanded operations in the Netherlands, hunting resistance networks with renewed aggression. Arrests multiplied. Torture became routine. Executions were public. Bodies left hanging as warnings. The resistance needed to fight back, not just hiding people and distributing underground newspapers. They needed to kill Germans, assassinate officers, eliminate collaborators, make the occupation costly. But there was a problem. Most resistance fighters were men, and German soldiers watched men carefully. A young man walking alone at night drew suspicion. A man loitering near military installations was questioned. A man carrying a bag was searched. But a teenage girl on a bicycle, nobody looked twice. That's when Frans van der Wiel approached the Oversteegen family. Van der Wiel was a commander in the Raad van Verzet, the Council of Resistance, one of the main resistance organisations in Haarlem. He'd heard about Trientje and her daughters, their safe house operations, their courage. He came to their apartment with a proposal. "We need people who can move freely through the city," he said. "People the Germans won't suspect. People who can get close to targets." He looked at Freddie and Truus. "We need you." Freddie was 14. Truus was 16. Van der Wiel was asking them to become assassins. Trientje didn't hesitate. She looked at her daughters. "Your choice," she said. They said yes. The training was brief. Van der Wiel took them to a safe house outside Haarlem, showed them how to handle weapons, a Walther P38 pistol, a British Webley revolver, how to load, how to aim, how to fire at close range. The girls had never held guns before. The weapons were heavy, loud, frightening. "You won't have time for multiple shots," Van der Wiel said. "You get close, you fire, you run." That's it. He taught them how to throw grenades, pull the pin, count to 3, throw, take cover. The blast radius is 15 feet, stay clear. He taught them how to identify targets, SS officers, Gestapo agents, Dutch NSB collaborators, the National Socialistische Beweging, Dutch Nazis who worked with the occupiers. "These are the priority targets," Van der Wiel said. "Eliminate them." He taught them how to escape. Plan your route before the attack. Memorize side streets. Know where you can dump the weapon. Know where you can blend into crowds. Never run straight home. Make 3 turns minimum. Watch for followers. The training lasted 1 week. Then Van der Wiel gave them their first assignment. "There's an NSB officer who's been informing on Jewish families in hiding," he said. "He drinks at a cafe on Zeilstraat every Thursday evening. He leaves around 10 p.m, walks home alone. We want him dead." Freddie and Truus looked at each other. This was real now. Not practice. Not theory. They were being asked to kill a man. Truus would take the shot. She was older, steadier. Freddie would be the lookout and the escape coordinator. They'd use their bicycles, meet at a predetermined location, separate if things went wrong. Thursday, September 2nd, 1943. 10:08 p.m, Zeilstraat, Haarlem. The target emerged from the cafe, slightly drunk, walking unsteadily toward his apartment 3 blocks away. Truus followed on her bicycle, pedalled past him, stopped, waited. As he approached, she pulled the Walther P38 from beneath her coat. "Excuse me, sir." He turned, looked at her, a teenage girl alone at night. For a moment, he seemed concerned. Was she lost? Truus fired. 3 times. Centre mass. The shots echoed through the narrow street. The man collapsed. Truus was back on her bicycle before he hit the ground. She turned the corner. Freddie was waiting with an alternate route. They separated, took different paths home. The NSB officer died on the street before help arrived. Freddie Oversteegen and Truus Oversteegen had just committed their first assassination. Freddie was 14 years old. Truus was 16. It would not be their last. Over the next 2 years, the Oversteegen sisters became 2 of the most prolific resistance fighters in Haarlem. They operated as a team, usually with Freddie on reconnaissance and Truus as the shooter, though they switched roles depending on the mission. Sometimes they worked alone, sometimes with other resistance members, but their method remained consistent. Use their appearance as cover: teenage girls, schoolgirls, innocent, harmless. The Germans never suspected them. Their tactics evolved. The bicycle became their signature. They'd ride through the city, canvas bags in their baskets, smiles on their faces. Inside the bags, pistols, grenades, ammunition, resistance newspapers, forged documents. German soldiers would wave at them, sometimes stop them for idle conversation. The pretty Dutch girls on bicycles. Never once did it occur to the soldiers that these girls were carrying the weapons that would kill their officers hours later. One of their most effective tactics was the seduction kill. A resistance commander would identify a target, usually a high-ranking German officer or a particularly brutal Gestapo agent. Truus, who was older and more conventionally attractive, would approach the target in a bar or cafe, flirt, laugh at his jokes, accept an invitation for a walk in the woods outside town. The officer would follow, thinking he was about to spend an evening with a willing Dutch girl. Instead, he'd walk into an ambush. Truus would lead him to a predetermined location where Freddie and other resistance fighters waited. The officer would be shot, his body buried in the woods. He'd be listed as missing, presumed deserted. The Germans never found the bodies. How many officers died this way? The sisters never said. Some estimates put it at a dozen, maybe more. But the seduction kills were dangerous. Emotionally and operationally, you had to look a man in the eyes, smile at him, let him think you liked him, then lead him to his death. Some resistance fighters couldn't do it. The psychological cost was too high. Freddie and Truus did it anyway. When asked about it years later, Truus said simply, "It never bothered me. These men were monsters. They deserved what they got." The grenade attacks were different, more public, more spectacular, more terrifying for the Germans. The British supplied the Dutch resistance with weapons through airdrops and smuggling networks. Mills bombs were common, small, easy to conceal, devastating at close range. The resistance used them for ambushes, attacks on military vehicles, sabotage operations, and assassinations. Freddie and Truus became specialists in grenade attacks. The bicycle was perfect for this. You could approach a target, drop or throw the grenade, and be gone before anyone realized what happened. The confusion after the blast gave you time to escape. By the time the Germans organized a search, you were blocks away, just another Dutch girl on a bicycle. Their most audacious attack came in March 1944. Intelligence indicated that a high-ranking SD officer, Sicherheitsdienst, the SS intelligence service, was visiting Haarlem for a meeting with local collaborators. The meeting was scheduled at a building on Gedempte Uitgracht. Heavy security, multiple guards, a motorcade. A direct attack was impossible. Too many soldiers, too much firepower, but the resistance identified a weakness. The officers would arrive by staff car. They'd exit the vehicles at the front entrance. For 10 seconds, maybe 15, they'd be exposed on the street. Van der Wiel asked the Oversteegen sisters if they could hit that window. Freddie said yes. March 18th, 1944, 2:35 p.m., Gedempte Uitgracht. Freddie and Truus positioned themselves on opposite corners, both on bicycles, both with canvas bags containing grenades. The staff cars arrived. 4 vehicles. Soldiers jumped out first, forming a perimeter. Then the officers emerged. 3 men in SS uniforms, 1 in civilian clothes, likely Gestapo. Truus pulled the pin on her grenade, counted to 2, threw. The grenade landed 3 feet from the Gestapo officer. It detonated. The blast killed 2 officers instantly, wounded 3 soldiers. Chaos erupted. Freddie threw her grenade toward the staff cars. It exploded beneath one vehicle, disabling it and killing the driver. Then both sisters were pedaling away, disappearing into side streets while German soldiers fired randomly at nothing. The attack killed 3 high-ranking German officers, wounded 7 others. And the Germans never identified the attackers. Just 2 girls on bicycles, gone before anyone could react. This became a pattern. Grenade attacks on German convoys, on officers entering buildings, on soldiers gathered in cafes. The Oversteegen sisters struck, then vanished. The Germans began referring to them in reports as ghost terrorists. They knew someone was killing their officers. They didn't know who, but they were getting closer. By late 1944, the Gestapo had intensified their hunt for resistance networks in Haarlem. They'd captured several fighters, tortured them, extracted names. Safe houses were raided, weapons caches discovered. The net was closing. Van der Wiel warned the Oversteegen family. "You're probably on a list," he said. "The Gestapo doesn't know your names yet, but they know 2 young women are involved in attacks. They're watching. Be careful." Freddie and Truus became more cautious. varied their routes, changed their appearance, stopped operating together as often, but they didn't stop. The missions continued. Another collaborator shot, another officer killed, another grenade attack. Then came February 1945. The war was ending. The Allies had liberated most of France and Belgium. They were pushing into Germany. The Soviets were closing from the east. Everyone knew the Third Reich was finished. It was just a matter of time. But the Netherlands was still occupied, and the Germans, desperate and vengeful, were more brutal than ever. The hunger winter had begun. The Germans blocked food shipments to Western Netherlands as punishment for resistance activities. Thousands of Dutch civilians starved. The resistance fought back harder. Freddie was cycling through Haarlem on February 8, 1945, carrying forged ration cards hidden in her basket. She didn't notice the Gestapo agents following her until it was too late. They'd been watching the safe house she visited. When she emerged, they followed. She tried to lose them, turned down side streets, doubled back, but they stayed with her. 4 agents, 2 cars. They cornered her on a dead-end street near the train station. Freddie abandoned her bicycle and ran. The agents pursued on foot. She was fast, but they were faster. One of them grabbed her jacket. She twisted free, left the jacket in his hands, kept running. She turned a corner and saw more agents ahead. Trapped. She ducked into an apartment building, ran up the stairs, pounded on doors. An elderly woman opened her door. Freddie pushed inside. "Please," she gasped. "Hide me." The woman stared at her, heard boots on the stairs, Gestapo voices shouting. The woman made a decision. "Get under the bed," she said. Freddie crawled under the bed. The woman threw a blanket over the edge to hide her. Seconds later, the Gestapo kicked in the door. "Have you seen a girl?" they demanded. The woman shook her head. "No one here but me." They searched the apartment, looked in closets, behind furniture, but not under the bed. The woman stood in the centre of the room, arms crossed, glaring at them with the righteous indignation of an elderly Dutch woman being harassed by German thugs. The Gestapo agents eventually left, cursing. Freddie stayed under that bed for 3 hours. When it was safe, she crawled out, thanked the woman whose name she never learned, and escaped through the back of the building. She'd been seconds from capture, from torture, from execution. The resistance pulled her from active operations for 2 weeks to let the heat die down. But she went back. One more mission, then another, until May 5th, 1945. Liberation Day. The Germans surrendered. The occupation ended. After 5 years, the Netherlands was free. May 5th, 1945. Haarlem, Netherlands. Canadian troops entered the city. German soldiers laid down their weapons. People poured into the streets, crying, singing, waving Dutch flags that had been hidden for 5 years. The war was over. Freddie Oversteegen stood in the crowd watching the celebration. She was 19 years old. She'd spent 5 years of her life fighting the Nazis. 5 years carrying bombs and pistols, 5 years killing men. She'd survived when thousands of resistance fighters hadn't. But standing there, watching people celebrate, she felt nothing. No joy, no relief, just emptiness. The resistance dissolved. Members returned to normal life, or tried to. Van der Weyl disappeared into anonymity. The safe houses closed. The weapons were buried or turned over to Allied authorities. Everyone went home. Except there was no going home, not really. Not after what they'd done. After the liberation, the Dutch government awarded medals to resistance fighters. The sisters received recognition for their service. But the details of their operations remained classified for decades. The assassinations, the seduction kills, the grenade attacks. The government didn't want to publicise how young they'd been. Didn't want to admit they'd used teenage girls as assassins. Freddie and Truus were told not to talk about it. For years they didn't. They tried to build normal lives. Truus married, had children, worked as an artist. Freddie also married, worked various jobs, tried to forget. But the memories didn't fade. Freddie later described experiencing what we now call PTSD, nightmares, flashbacks, guilt. Not for killing Nazis, she never regretted that, but for the years stolen from her childhood, for the innocence she'd never had. "I was 14 years old," she said in an interview decades later. "I should have been in school, playing with friends. Instead, I was killing people. That changes you, forever." The Dutch government finally declassified their records in the 1980s. Journalists began investigating. the story of the Oversteegen sisters emerged. 2 teenage girls who'd been among the most effective resistance fighters in Haarlem, who'd killed dozens of Germans, who'd used their innocence as a weapon. In 2014, Truus and Freddie were awarded the Mobilization War Cross, one of the Netherlands' highest military honours. The ceremony took place nearly 70 years after the war ended. Truus was 89, Freddie was 86. At the ceremony, a reporter asked Truus how she felt about what she'd done during the war. Truus looked at him and said simply, "I did what was necessary. Would I do it again? Yes," without hesitation. Truus Oversteegen died on June 18, 2016, at age 92. She's buried in Haarlem. Freddie Oversteegen died on September 5, 2018, one day before her 93rd birthday. She's buried beside her sister. The exact number of Germans and collaborators killed by the Oversteegen sisters will never be known. Conservative estimates put it at 30 to 40. Some historians believe it was higher. The sisters themselves never kept count, and in later interviews they refused to provide specific numbers. It wasn't about the numbers, Freddie said. It was about survival, about fighting back, about refusing to let them win. Music cue, reflective, building to resolution. Here's what the story of Freddie and Truus Oversteegen tells us. War doesn't care about your age. It doesn't care that you're 14 years old. It doesn't care that you should be in school, worrying about homework and friendships. War takes whatever you're willing to give and demands more. The Oversteegen sisters gave everything. Their childhood, their innocence, their psychological well-being. They became killers before they were old enough to vote. They looked Nazi officers in the eyes, smiled, waved, and then killed them minutes later. And they did it because someone had to. Because the men couldn't move freely through occupied streets, but girls on bicycles could. Because their youth and innocence made them invisible to an enemy that didn't believe teenage girls could be dangerous. The Germans never saw them coming, right up until the moment the grenade exploded, right up until the moment the pistol fired, right up until they lay dead on a Haarlem street, killed by the schoolgirl they'd waved at 30 seconds earlier. There's a photograph of Freddie and Truus taken in 1945, just after liberation. They're standing beside their bicycles, smiling, looking like any other teenage girls. If you didn't know their story, you'd never guess what they'd done. You'd never imagine those smiling girls had killed dozens of men, that they'd thrown grenades, that they'd led officers into the woods and executed them. That's the point. That's what made them so effective. Nobody imagined it. Not the Germans, not their victims, not anyone. September 15th, 1943, Haarlem, Netherlands. 2 SS officers waved at a 14-year-old girl on a bicycle. They saw a harmless child, an innocent Dutch schoolgirl. They died 30 seconds later, killed by the grenade she threw around the corner. Freddie Oversteegen was 14 years old. She should have been studying for exams. Instead, she was fighting a war and winning. That's not heroism in the traditional sense. It's survival. It's resistance. It's a refusal to accept occupation quietly. It's a decision to fight back no matter the cost. The Oversteegen sisters paid that cost for 70 years. The nightmares, the guilt, the memories they couldn't escape, but they never regretted it. When asked, both sisters said they'd do it again. Because some things are worth fighting for, even when you're 14, even when the enemy doesn't see you coming, even when the only weapon you have is the innocence they don't expect you to weaponize. The Nazi officers waved at the schoolgirl. She waved back. Then she killed them.